So remember I said that what you resist will persist. And so if you're resisting being owned by someone, if you're resisting death, if you're resisting life, if you're resisting just anything that you are in fear of, that fear and what you think is that fear will persist in your world, and you will find all the evidence to support your thesis and your theme of the world that you live in. And to redirect someone from that ideology, from that behavioral mechanism, from that psychosis, they would actually have to face every fear and feed it and release the trauma and realize that was never something to be fearful of. But that's the thing, dying people, when you think about it, dying people are afraid to die. They're afraid of everything. That's why the J world is so important to understand. Because a dying world is a violent world. A dying world is a world of destruction, chaos, obviously a lot of death, and so much fear. And believe me, it took me 7 years to release the fears, to release the demons, to release all the trauma, to feed myself, to finally realize there is nothing to be afraid of. Okay? There's nothing to be afraid of when you have control over your own immune system and your own alimentary canal. And so what's going on right now in the Middle East is kind of crazy, because those in the West who are dying, like literally dying, are identifying with those who they think are the victims. Well, I can understand, because you're walking into the middle of an argument and you have no idea who the players are really. I mean, you've been given a little background of who the players are, but you don't know the history, you don't know the background. I mean, it's like walking into a family fight, a quarrel, a lover's quarrel. It's like walking into a bar not knowing what's going on and listening to somebody's perception of what's going on in that room. No different than going into a jail. I'm watching Orange is the New Black, and you literally have to sit back and watch everything. Look at who the queen bee is, the king bee is, and figure out your place. And you can't make snap decisions on who and what and where and when, because you could ultimately be wrong about the situation and end up compromising yourself. Okay? So yesterday I asked Google what barbarian, because I remember Conan the Barbarian, and that was played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I'm thinking the barbarians, and there's movies about the barbarians. And then I remember what George Bush said back in 9/11 about, crusades and all that shit. I'm like, oh, Lordy. And just all the different history that's out there that you have access to, whether it's the movies, whether it's reading books, but you're like, well, it depends on what you're reading. Why are you reading this? What kind of propaganda or what kind of perspective are they touting? And what are they ultimately trying to get you to believe or think? And that's the thing about critical thinking, is that you read everything with an open mind to change your mind. You may read one side of a history and be like, oh gosh, and I've read one side of history. I learned one side of history as a kid, learned another side of history as an adult, and then learned another side of history as I evolved. Okay? Give me 1 second. Okay. And so evolution is necessary so you can evolve. Evolution is necessary so you can evolve. Because then what happens when you don't evolve, then you will destroy things that actually are trying to keep you alive. You'll bite the hand that feeds you. That's what happens with these dogs that are dying. They bite the hand that feeds them. And then you have to humanely put them down, right? Is there any humane way to put anything down? Oh God, that's why I don't want to have an animal in this world right now until we change the way we do stuff. Because, eventually that dog breaks down, and if people are not equipped to deal with the suffering of life, of evolution, when the environment changes, then they have to destroy everything that goes through that crazy ass change. And sometimes that change is violent. And so, yeah, evolution is necessary, and how to handle evolution, to handle it properly, is necessary and effectively. Okay? And so, yeah, I'm just like, oh my God. So anyways, so I Googled the word barbarian, and I listened to Bing's, and it's actually pretty egalitarian when you do Bing chat. It's the artificial intelligence that galvanizes all the information based upon your subject matters and develops sentences. And so I did a copy and paste of it from my little chat thing. But of course, I'm going to read this. Of course, everything is relative, right? And has historical reference, also used as a way to identify where people place in the world that we live in. All right, so barbarian is all relative. When you call somebody a barbarian, if you call them back then, in 10,000 BC or 5,000 BC, you have to be like, okay, that's pejorative, or it's saying that there's an enemy over there that's outside of, a specific type of situation. So, barbarian's all relative. When, like, say, I'm in the West, right, and there's people that are indigenous somewhere that don't have as many advanced capabilities, then you can call them barbarian because they're not as civilized as you. All right, so of course everything is relative and has historical reference, also used as a way to identify where people place in the world they live in and we live in. And when you are capable of destroying somebody else, you force people to be capable of destroying you. So that's what's going on right now, okay? That's why we're in a great reset. Because we are being forced to lower ourselves to the lowest common denominator out there. When you're forced to protect yourself from your fellow man at the micro level and the macro level, you have to turn into a warrior. Like, you really have to. And that's what I kind of figured out now with my upbringing, is that my mother turned me into a warrior. Just like when you watched the Trojan, or what is it, the Trojan War, or is it Gladiator? And the other one with Brad Pitt. And he was learning how to fight the battle and joust and do whatever, sword fighting. Okay? I was raised in a household where I had to really learn how to fight, but psychologically learn how to, I'm not saying physically, it wasn't like that, because that's illegal. But there's ways to do it. And it's a psychological battle. And then you have to also be strong. So the physical battles are out there with people who are going to want to hurt you, and you have to defend yourself. Like, I had my ass kicked at summer camp and went into some of these institutions and got jumped and all that. So that was a battle to learn how to defend myself and survive being around my peers who want to destroy you because you're different. Okay, so I get a psychological battle at home, a psychological battle, or a physical battle out there on the playground, out there in my community. And so you have to learn how to fight for your fucking life. And when you have to be a warrior, like literally a warrior in your world, it's exhausting, okay? But you have to in order to survive in this world. If you're always going to lay down and let everybody screw you and walk all over you, you won't fucking survive. And that's a segment of the population that will just lay down and die for whoever and not fight for their life and just give their kids to whoever and just sacrifice them to whoever. And the people who are fighting for their life, and some are trying to fight for somebody else's life that they have no idea what the hell they're doing because they're 6,000, 7,000 miles away. And so they've misplaced their warrior mentality. They don't fight for their own life. They're fighting for somebody else who doesn't give a fuck about them. And it's not going to make a goddamn difference. That's what you're watching right now with all these activists and those who are armchair quarterbacks. And so that's why we're in a great reset. People are forced to go to war because they have to protect themselves from those who would destroy them. Believe me, when I put so many measures with Facebook where I have to delete, block, and do all this stuff and monitor my Facebook and be an administrator and block all the fucking trolls and or have to have a gun and make sure that, my FBI guy is on fucking speed dial and all that shit. not that I'm really doing that, but I mean, where you feel like you have to put so many protective measures around you because there's so many people who want to destroy you or take your shit. That's the society we've built because of so many differing ideologies, and we haven't come from we don't understand history. We don't understand two sides of the story. We don't understand both sides of the story or all sides of a story. We've walked into a middle of history or of an argument or a war and made assumptions about everything. Didn't bother to learn anything else but what was told to you at the time, and maybe you kind of evolved it and be like, well, it's not the chemtrails, it's the 5G, or it's the water, or it's all the GMO, and people's arguments seem to be changing, but they keep replacing the same enemy with another one, or a savior. Oh, this saved me. This turmeric saved me. This diatomaceous earth saved me. This supplement saved me. This girl saved me. I mean, the savior and the demons have been changed out and been radicalized for the last at least 20 years, at least the last 10 years since I've been an activist. Okay? And so somebody walking to the middle of a war, watching from the sidelines, would not know the history of the war unless they studied history and actually studied it. I actually study history. I read everything. I read everybody's different perspectives on it. Sometimes some of your perspectives are so radicalized that I'm like, okay, I had enough, thank you. Let me read the other side of it. But all of us came into the middle of a war or a history. Only a few people actually study history and understand what's going on right now. It doesn't take much to understand the other point of view. I mean, it does for some people. They can't get out of being right about their situation and about the world because they've been so radicalized in their politics, in their religion, oh my God, and in their science dogmas, right? So, but again, if you've been injured and have so much hate in your heart and you choose to be ignorant, you'll bite the hand that fed you and feeds you. And that's what's going on right now. That's why I was so disgusted this morning, because it dawned on me, I had so much trauma and so much crap in me. It doesn't matter where it comes from, because the correlation does not always equal causation. It's just an accumulation of life experiences, choices, even the ideologies at the time, the traditions at the time, and things change, things evolve, and everything evolves. And so when I finally released those demons and I fed myself all the food and was not afraid of the food anymore, I started then realizing that there was nothing to fear, and I understood the other points of view, and wow. And I stopped biting the hand that fed me. I stopped taking part of the activist groups. I started systematically pulling out of the anti-V, out of the anti-chemtrails. I systematically pulled myself out of every single fucking hate group that was out there that I was radicalized in. Oh, believe me, I was an Alex Jones devotee for many years. My husband and I, we were radicalized on the truck when we were listening to YouTube and all the different people who are right wing, okay, all the pro-Trump people. I get it. I understand you're looking for a savior because you don't understand what's going on and you're dying and you're deteriorating and you have to blame somebody. Oh, I get it. I'm watching right now. People who are dying and deteriorating are so hateful, and they're dying. When somebody's dying, they're fucking hateful, or they're all about love. It's either love or hate when somebody's dying. Well, that's death and reproduction. That's one religion. It's a lot of religions. And so now you're watching people in the West who have been given so much, who wake up in a warm home, in a nice bed, with people around them that'll give them everything they want because they asked for it. And you know who you are because you're propped up by your community. You get to go outside with no bullets going by you, whizzing by you. You're not looking at devastation out there, unless you're living in the freaking ghetto. But you choose to live there, I guess. But you have access to food, clean water, clean plumbing, protection from the fucking government, from the police force if you were in trouble. And you are just mangling the hands that are feeding you. Like literally mangling the hands. You are destroying that which is keeping you alive. That's the irony of it all, right? And so you'll bite the hand that fed you and feeds you. And I'm watching people on my Facebook who live in Scotland, who live in the UK, who live in America, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Western Europe. And they are right now steadily chewing and even mangling and biting so hard and ripping the hands that are feeding them. That's some pretty fucked up shit, but that's also, when people are dying, that's what they do. They bite the hand that feeds them. And you get chaos, and you get also a bunch of children, too, in the process. And so right now we are experiencing so many people who are biting the hands that are feeding them. And when a dog bites the hand that feeds them, the dog must be put down in a very humane way. Now do you understand what's going on? Okay, so you're going to have your oncology, you're going to have the frequencies change, you're going to have all your herbal remedies and the cannabis, all that you have to your disposal. You'll have your painkillers and everything else until those don't work anymore. And then now you're on morphine and you're then going like, holy shit. Or you have your religion and all your friends and family that are distracting you. So you'll get everything to keep you relatively okay as you are leaving. And then when those don't work anymore, then you are in agony. Because how much can the body be cured when it wants to fucking live and you won't let it? And then eventually the environment will change again. And that new surge of energy your body's trying to live by trying to release a demon takes you out. That's the died suddenly. Those are people who abuse the things that kind of gave them a little bit of an edge over somebody else, and they want more of an edge, more of an edge, more of an edge. And so they're selling their elderberry syrup and their turmeric and honey and apple cider vinegar, and then it goes into surgeries and something else. And then they're blaming all the V's and all the shedding and all that stuff. They're blaming everybody around them, but they haven't even looked at their practices. And not only trapping the little demons of offspring inside because of their practices using herbal remedies and all the other things that take away their pain. Oh gosh. And yeah. I'm just like, holy crap with all of this. And so yeah, so you're watching people doing this, and they've taken advantage of all the things that gave them a little bit of an edge over people. And then now they're addicted. And they're suffering. Fucking suffering. And they're destructive. And some of these are matriarchs. They're heads of families. They're grandmothers. Or mothers. Do their children and grandchildren stand a chance when a grandmother or a mother is just wailing on Facebook of how everyone owns her? How everyone is destroying her when she has put herself in the hospital system? When she has purposely taken away food from herself? And so that's what I'm saying. You can't really blame the government when you think about it, because when somebody is dying, there's no reasoning with them. The thing the system can do is just make your way out the door as comfortable as possible, and it sucks to watch. And yeah, you want to be mad. Believe me, I have been mad for years. Because I know what's coming for a lot of people who can't handle the pain of coming back to life again, of reversing the aging process when you think about it. I know what's in for them, and it fucking sucks. But what else is there to do? If people are in so much pain, eventually it's going to be rest in peace, but you can't just destroy people. That's why there's FDA-approved protocols to systematically take your life away. Well, I mean, it's not for me to decide for somebody else. It sucks on my end because I can handle the pain. I can handle the food. I can stay home and stay safe. I can pull back on my spending habits. I can change and evolve and all that, and others can't. And it sucks when you know you can do stuff because you've been strengthened as a fucking warrior as a child, and you've fought everyone your whole life, and you got stronger and stronger and stronger, so you're able to handle something like this, and others were not given that opportunity. Others were not given that chance because of their politics, their parents' religion, and the sciences around them that did not allow them to suffer even a little bit. They had somebody always bailing them out, or doing surgeries, or doing remedies, or buying them everything under the fucking sun. There was really no respect for earning anything. They're all entitled, and then they turn vicious as they become an adult. So, right now we're experiencing so many people who are biting the hands that are feeding them. And when a dog bites the hand that feeds them, that dog must be put down in a very humane way. Now do you understand what's going on? You better learn your history and you better open up your eyes because you are being given a choice, especially in the West. We are changing from the old world of slavery, of women's slavery, of broad mares burying babies left and right, to animal slavery where we're just breeding animals left and right and they're ending up in the shelter to be butchered by the veterinarians or end up in somebody's home who abuses them or doesn't care about them and they run away because they don't like their home and they end up getting hit by a fucking car. I see that on my Facebook. This poor animal was missing and ended up being hit by a car because the owner didn't take care of it. And they was like, oh, I'm taking it to the vet now. Oh God, it has a broken hip. She's doing okay. I'm like, why the hell would that poor animal be in that situation to begin with if you weren't so irresponsible? But that's what we're breeding in our society is irresponsible people. Okay? And enslaving them. And not taking care of them, whether it's the children or the animals. And so if you think American Israel and the West are the spawn of Satan, then why don't you move to the Gaza Strip and fight the battles of the people you claim to defend so conveniently behind your computer? Or better yet, move to Russia, right? Because Russia is backing Hamas, as I've heard. Well, yeah, Russia doesn't like the Jews, right? Russia had the pogroms against the Jews way back then in 1918. The pogroms were the genocide of the Jews of that time. That's why the Jews then emigrated to go to Israel, because they were getting genocided left and right in Russia and in other places. Move to North Korea, right? If you're so against the West and Israel. Or move to Iran, right? Why not? You can be one of those women that are in the burqas, right? That are not allowed to speak or anything, not allowed to study, maybe barely even allowed to drive. They have aggressive punishments for even an accusation. Women get stoned to death if they were accused of going outside the marriage. Oh yeah, that's fucking, go for it. If you think America and the West and Israel are the spawn of Satan, I fucking dare all of you guys who are so entitled to be such an activist on Facebook to go pick up yourself and go to Gaza and go sit with the Hamas and play that game. Or go to Russia. You saw how many people wanted to get Brittany Griner out of Russia, right? She learned her lesson being in that jail. See, it's so nice to be that privileged in the West, to be such an activist. So I dare you to go move to these places that you think are better than your town. It must be nice to be an armchair quarterback, right? You're so privileged. That's why we're in a great reset. All of you waking up in a nice warm bed in a safe neighborhood, relatively safe neighborhood, and going out in the street and protesting what's going on. Why don't you suit up like the Israelis? Like they have people who are dual citizenship. They have families here and they're living here, but they're being called back to Israel to go fight in that war. And they are suiting up and they're going to go fight. So if that's the case, if you're so inclined to pick up arms against Israel and against America, then you go to fucking Gaza and wear the Hamas outfit and go play the American jihad bullshit. Go do that. I dare you. I fucking dare you. And so why don't you suit up like the Israelis and go fight for Hamas? Go fight for the Palestinians in Gaza if you're so inclined to be that vocal about how much you hate the home that is giving you so much. Are you kidding me? And I said F, but I kind of been trying to delete the effing because I'm that upset. And it took me a minute to be upset. It took me a minute to understand what was going on because I had to study everything. I didn't even know, even though I was raised Jewish, I didn't know the full background because I chose not to know because I had so many other things going on. I had health issues. I had survival issues. And so once I finally got rid of my health issues and survival issues, then I had the clarity of mind to understand what's going on. And that's why it's going to be very difficult for you to reach anyone who's dying because they don't have the fucking clarity of mind. So you stay away from dying people. And you're seeing them all over Facebook. They are the activists and they are dying actively. And you don't want to take advice or even really listen to someone's dying unless you're dying yourself. I'm not dying, so I stay away from the activists who are dying. And I let you know who's dying out there because you really do not surround yourself with dying people because they will pull you down with them. And they will destroy you if you allow them to. And so it must be nice to be in Europe, so protected, and post so much hate, standing for something. You have no idea what's going on and the history behind it. Okay? And so it's unfortunate that there are people who are not advanced enough to get out of harm's way. Maybe they can't. Maybe they're held captive by an extremist regime. What can you do? You can't save everybody. You can't save people in Afghanistan who are run by the Taliban. You can't save the women there. If there's a woman that finds a way to strategically get out of Afghanistan, or strategically get out of the Gaza, or strategically get out of North Korea or Iran or anywhere else, then you want her in your world, because you know why? She was that strategic. She was a warrior, and she desperately wanted to make something of herself and come to a land like America. Or walking miles and miles away from South America or Mexico to end up over here and fight for their place here. People who have been given everything, they don't even see the value of what they are in. That's what we're dealing with right now. That's what's going on right now. All right? So believe me, I wish we didn't have to have guns in this world or go to war, but there are idiots out there. They force you to defend yourself and force you to fight a battle where there will be only one winner and a surveillance society. Now you understand why 15-minute cities. Okay? Now you understand, because now with what's going on, see this, now this makes sense with these 50, because I'm sure the system knew they were eventually going to have to do this type of thing. And the people are going to be radicalized. And when you do get people under surveillance, like the internet, YouTube, Facebook, all the different modes of whatever, and then you have, cameras everywhere, and you say something, you see something, say something, and now it makes sense with what's going on, because people hate Muslims, they hate Jews, they hate anyone that looks different, they hate anyone that could be LGBTQ. There's so much hate out there and intolerance. That's why the surveillance society. That's why 15-minute cities. Because they have to watch those who are prone to violence and destruction. Believe me, if they wanted you to die, all of you who are watching me, you would be dead. You wouldn't be around. So what the hell are you resisting? But that's the thing, when people are dying, they don't have the type of, balanced logic. It's radicalization. It's extremism. And it's so easy to go to when you're dying. So now, so believe me, I wish we didn't have to have guns in this world or go to war, but there are idiots out there that force you to defend yourself and force you to fight battles where there'll be only one winner and a surveillance society. Now you understand why 15-minute cities. That's why we're in a great reset. Or, I understand now. Believe me, I understand now. Sometimes I don't want to understand how much I do, but it's what set me free. Because I learned both sides of the argument with the anti-V and the pro-V. I learned both sides of the argument with the chemtrail, the pro and the con. I learned all the different arguments out there, so I understood why the system was doing what it was doing. I even had to understand my parents. Do you realize I spent so much time trying to understand my parents' background and the world that they came from, and the world of psychology and chemistry and physics and religion and algebra? I even understood people on my Facebook who are like Jehovah's Witnesses. I even understand even the Muslim, well, not so much, but enough. I even try to understand all the born-again Christians, the Illuminati. Oh gosh, what else? I just looked up everything and Googled everything and figured out and listened to people's perceptions. And I made my own choices. And I still understand where they're coming from. I understand why. And again, when you're dying, you're not going to want to understand both sides because you don't have the capacity to. You're dying. And so, understanding both sides to any story saved my own ass. And now I understand history and present and future. By the way, we are so privileged here, and we starve ourselves from food and say food is poison, and we have the privilege to go and blame somebody else. We are so privileged here in the West. We get the choice to butcher ourselves with antibiotics and surgery and herbal remedies, and some of us blame somebody else. Ungrateful children turn into entitled, vicious adults. I get the freedom to develop a protocol that must follow certain guidelines. I can't make claims because you can't. You can't guarantee someone's going to be pain-free on this protocol. No. What am I promoting? immortality through food. And you have to release a little offspring baby, the microbial and the macrobial babies in your body. And then you have to maybe kind of curb your conception as far as children, because they're taking away so many of your resources that you will end up dead because you won't have time to come back from that and fill in what was taken away during that time of gestation and then all those years of raising those children. Okay? And so I get the freedom to develop a protocol to save my ass from all of you. Maybe you should look at your own politics of genociding of your own family with food mitigation and antibiotics. Okay? And so, yeah, I promote that you have to feel the pain. Okay, well, if you can't handle it and you're afraid of food and you can't cough and sneeze and blow your nose and it's too much work for you, then the system will just go and commandeer all of your orifices and try to clean you out, but then you still haven't rebuilt your infrastructure. You just were cleaned out. Doesn't mean that it helped you in the future. It just means that, okay, now you're cleaned out. You can kind of walk another day. But then when that day comes, when your heart fucking gives out because you're starving and you've been using so many remedies that those little babies inside of you still are eating away at the infrastructure, then you won't be around anymore. So it's not going to fucking matter, right? But hey, you had a good life, right? Maybe, I don't know. I guess your eulogy will tell everybody you had a great life. And so I'm going to read this again. I get the freedom to develop a protocol to save my ass from all of y'all. Maybe you should look at your own politics of genociding of your own family with food mitigation and antibiotics. And you have enough nerve to question what's going on in the Middle East. When you have declared war on your own genetic line with herbal elderberry syrup, remedies, and surgeries, and fear of food, and gluten-free everything, and your children are starving. Of course they are. Your children are starving because you're in an accelerated environment. You're afraid of food. They're eating very light because they're afraid to think the food is poison. And mommy said food is poison and only eat organic and don't eat any processed food. So these kids are starving in an accelerated environment. Who do you think is going to win? The system is going to take them out because the system is still going to do what it does, and you are starving yourself. You're not eating for the environment. These poor kids have allergies. They have deficits. They have issues, or they have so much to them that they don't have enough alignment in their infrastructure, and so there's a lot of chaos in their body, and it'll take one day that another frequency change or a predisposed issue come up, and then bam, gone. That's what's going on right now because you've been so privileged to say food is poison when you've been given every food out there. And of course, when you have issues of deficit because of so much rampant procreation and you're coming into this world at major deficits and you had your immune system activated by so many different things, how is it the system's fault when your parents chose to have you? Well, I didn't choose to be here. I didn't choose to be here either, but I'm fucking here. But I found a way to survive. You think that I made a choice to be in America? No, I was brought here from the Vietnam War. All of you were brought here from your parents because of the way the culture was at the time, to have 1 billion babies. So what are you going to do with your life? Are you going to go and just throw it away because you're dying? Well, you're the one that's taking away food. You're the one that's having to run away every single life force in your body because you don't want to feel immune system activation. And so, yeah. And so, let me read this again. And you have enough nerve to question what's going on in the Middle East when you have declared war on your own genetic line with herbal elderberry syrup, remedies, and surgeries, and fear of food, and gluten-free everything, and your kids are starving. That's a little barbaric, don't you think? And I mentioned barbarian. In the ancient times, a member of a community or tribe not belonging to one of the great civilizations, the Greek and the Roman and the Christian, the city was besieged by the barbarians, an uncultured or brutish person. And so Bing Chat said, the barbarians are a term that has been used by different people and cultures throughout history to describe those who they consider to be outsiders, foreigners, or uncivilized. The word barbarian comes from the ancient Greek word barbaros, which meant someone who did not speak Greek and sound like they were saying barbar. The Greeks used this term to refer to anyone who was not part of their culture, such as the Egyptians, the Persians, the Phoenicians, and even other Greeks who had different dialects or customs. The Romans adopted the term barbarian from the Greeks and applied it to various people who lived beyond the borders of their empire, such as the Germans, the Celts or Celts, I think that's how you say it, Iberians, Thracians, Illyrians, and Sarmatians. The Romans often viewed those barbarians as enemies or threats to their civilization and fought many wars against them. Some of these barbarians groups eventually invaded and conquered parts of the Roman Empire in the 4th and 5th century AD, leading to the collapse in the West. Okay? And so that's what happened to King Solomon's temple, right? Was that it was taken over by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. In the Middle Ages, the term barbarian was also used by the Byzantine Greeks and other Christian Europeans to describe the Muslims, especially the Turks, who were their rivals in religion and politics. The Byzantines considered themselves to be the heirs of the ancient Roman civilization and saw that the Turks are as barbaric invaders who destroyed their lands and culture. The Crusades were launched by the Christians to reclaim the Holy Land from the Muslim barbarians in the 11th, 13th century AD. And that's why people were having an issue with George Bush talking about the Crusades, because they're like, oh shit, that's what's going on. All right. In modern times, the term barbarian had lost its original meaning of a non-Greek or non-Roman speaker and is now used more generally to describe someone who is cruel, violent, ignorant, or uncultured. The term can also be used in romantic or positive sense to describe someone who is free from constraints of civilization or society, such as a noble savage or a rebel, like James Dean, Rebel Without a Cause. However, the term is still often associated with historical stereotypes and prejudices that may not reflect the true nature or diversity of the people or culture labeled as barbarians. So it could be very discriminatory and intolerant. But when you think about it, me coming from California, right, and I come here to Ohio, and it's a lot of steel workers, just hard-charging steel workers, and a lot of blue collar over here, and a lot of factory workers, yes. And the men are built like brick shit houses. I would say in some respects that relative to where I came from, it's a little barbaric over here, but it's like anything, you get strong being around people who are kind of brutish, okay? You get very strong. If you can survive your husband out here as a woman, oh my gosh, because men are here huge. Women here, it's like what is it? Disney out here. The men are like built like brick shit houses. The girls are gorgeous out here. Like they're tall, they're dark hair, because a lot of Italians out here. Beautiful, gorgeous women out here. Okay? But they're skinny. And the men are like what you'd see in Gladiator. They're big and they're tough. They're definitely sexually appealing. That's what kind of I was like, well, okay. Okay, so it's very traditional out here. But so if you want to see from my perspective what barbarian would mean, it's something that would be different from the Silicon Valley, egghead type lifestyle where everyone's eating organic and gluten-free and sugar-free everything and salt-free, sugar-free, food-free world. You come here, everyone's eating meat, milk, cheese, and eggs and big, huge turkey drumsticks, sitting around a table like the Vikings. Okay, and everyone's in their traditional situations, what is that? Division of labor. And so, I could play both sides. I was trained in both sides as far as the traditional side and being, okay, kind of hot because I was and whatever. And then also intellectually capable. That if I'm going to be at home doing the traditional side of stuff, then I'm going to be studying something and expanding my brain. So those were the gifts my mother gave me. That came from not only Rosicrucian, but that came from the Jewish mystics. When you can train your daughter and sons to be able to handle all different types of environment and use the different gifts when they are necessary. But we have people who don't even want to open their mind to anything. They're fucking closed-minded, and their girls are only learn how to have sex and have babies, and that's it. That's what goes on in some of these places. All the girls know how to do is to be someone's wife and have a bunch of babies and work at a convenience store. And that's the extent of their future. What kind of future is for their daughters when that's what mother is doing? She's not even expanding her brain. She's drinking alcohol, having a bunch of sex, and what else? Partying a lot, but that's pretty much it. And then she goes and has a bunch of kids who do the same thing. What about giving your kids something different? Open their eyes to a larger world, not just a one-sided, one fairly small little. And that's the thing about diversity, is that there's people who are different than you, and you can't just destroy them because they're different than you. Understand where they're coming from. Have the intention to do that. Or else you become very intolerant and vicious and entitled and violent and barbaric. So then I said, who was there first really does not matter per se in the long run, right? However, when one extremist culture like Hamas wants to genocide a whole culture off the map, it is good to explore the official stories so we all can live in peace and harmony one day without arming ourselves to the teeth. And so I was looking up, well, who inhabited Gaza to begin with, right? I just went through and just asked Google this. And so the Canaanites are the best known from the biblical accounts that portrays them as a hostile pre-Israelite indigenous population residing in the Promised Land who were conquered by the tribes of Israel, okay, the 12 tribes of Israel under the leadership of Joshua following their exodus from Egypt. And so Joshua, Caleb, and David. And then David was the one that became King David because he took down Goliath, who was one of the Philistines. And there's the history, right? Who was the original inhabitants of the Gaza Strip? Originally a Canaanite settlement, it came under the control of the ancient Egyptians for roughly 350 years before being conquered and becoming one of the Philistines' principal cities of Gaza, became part of the Assyrian Empire around 730 BCE. Assyrian, yeah. And then 957 BC, the first temple was constructed during the reign of David's son. So after David destroyed Goliath and he took back the city that actually, was constructed during the, included, and then, so which came first, 957? Oh, that's right, okay. So 957, the first temple was constructed in the reign of David's son, and completed, son Solomon, and completed in 957 BC. Other sanctuaries retained their religious functions. However, still Hosea abolished them and established the temple of Jerusalem as the only place of sacrifice in the kingdom of Judah. And then 586 BC, during the first temple period, the first temple was built in 1000 BC by King Solomon, and King David conquered Jerusalem, made it his capital. The temple was destroyed in 586 BC by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, when he conquered Jerusalem. And so that's kind of where we're going here, is now they're taken back. But people, the Palestinians, Philistines, the Jordan, Egypt, all right, they all have a claim. The Christians, they all have a claim there. However, finally, Egypt and Jordan and other Arabian countries are accepting Jews to exist there as far as a homeland, Israel. But it's the Hamas, the extremists, that want to wipe Israel off the map, want to wipe the Jews off the map and push them out. And that's what we are dealing with right now, is the fact that Israel does not negotiate with terrorists. And you can't convert people. Remember that? You can't convert people. You can't say, okay, well, you hate me for 10,000 years and now you got to love me today and not try to destroy me. Oh, hell no. You can't do that. So eventually everything's going to have to come down to a war. It really is, right? It's going to have to. And so what is Hanukkah? A lesser Jewish festival lasting 8 days from the 25th day of Kislev, and commemorating the rededication of the temple in 165 BC by the Maccabees after the desecration by the Syrians. It is marked by the successive kindling of 8 lights. Okay? And so when that temple, I think King Solomon's temple, was destroyed, and the light candle was shining for 8 days, and that was, And so that's all Hanukkah. And so I said, go read books, activists, and do something constructive like save yourself and family from premature death. Violent people versus peaceful people has always been a war in all cultures. That's why diversity and tolerance is necessary, or else genocide of anyone who looks, acts, and says things differently than you. Believe me, I experienced the world hate against life in the J world, and people who want to live hated to feel their immune system activate. You heard that. You saw all that. You saw the Dr. Phil show. You saw everyone hating on me. That's what humans are capable of. You saw the YouTube videos, people making fun of me. making songs about me. Imagine if they had an arm or a sword and I was out there in the bush and they didn't like what I looked like or what I said, or they believed a rumor about me, they would have destroyed me. They would destroy me if given the chance. But now the system is allowing you to destroy people through spiritually, and you have the choice to turn them off and defend yourself, verbally, virtually. And so then you see what people are capable of if given the opportunity, but you see what they're capable of on the internet by what they say, who they galvanize, what kind of groups they develop against you. And you see what people have done, what the giants have done 6,000 years ago. And you will find dying people who will be hateful about what's going on, and they will have scripture to give you, to show you. That's why the Joe World is about reversing the aging process. Because dying people are fucking destructive, especially when they have been radicalized. That's why some of these families don't stand a chance, because the matriarch is destructive and she is proud of it. Okay? And she is proud of it. I mean, people who are so comfortable in their hate, they'll spew all over their Facebook. And they will use a scripture to justify their belief system. Because they're being given absolution. Because if they didn't have the scripture, what would they blame it on? At least the scripture is like a buffer, right? So they don't have to come off as discriminatory or racist. You just, here's a scripture. You can buffer your racism and your intolerance through a freaking scripture. I'm saying the system will give you every single way to absolve yourself from taking personal responsibility for your own life. Every single way. And so why do I bring everything back to me? Because once you know yourself, and once you experience what it's like to stand in somebody else's shoes, you know the world. Because if humanity was meant to be extinct, we wouldn't be here. That's why I'm disgusted with my fellow man in the West. You own yourself, but you have destroyed yourself, and you have been given your body, mind, and spirit to other. You have given away your body, mind, and spirit to other people, and you have the nerve to say they destroyed you. Remember, you put yourself in the hospital. You took all the drugs they gave you. You took away all of your immune system activation until the body couldn't handle it anymore. Those in the West have a chance to save themselves. Save themselves from what? From whatever you think is going to attack you. Save yourself from whatever said enemy is out there. Nobody is forcing you to go out to war, and nobody's making you take anything. The next major frequency shift, the major suffering, will be silenced. Oh, it will be. Okay? Because those who are already behind the 8 ball suffering so much all over Facebook, and they are, may not be around anymore. Right now, they're using their last little bit of energy to protest their way out the door. Stay out of their way. Because they will shoot so many different hateful, vitriolic types of words to Facebook, because that's all they can do, which I understand. They're not going to go and attack their own family. They'll do it through herbs and remedies and food mitigation. That's a different way. They're not going to go out there in the street and be like, oh, neighbor, you're different. No, they're going to do it on Facebook, which is great. So you get to see what your neighbors are like. You get to see what people are like out there. You get to watch people dying through Facebook. It's fucking insane. All right, so now let's go to where I left off yesterday. I think the reason why immortality was never introduced is because we haven't found the answer to the perfect human. The system always needed to make sure they had a loophole to start over again. And that's what the negative is. So when I did that whole negative positive thing, okay, that a positive times a positive equals a positive, and negative times a negative equals a positive, and negative times a positive equals a negative, that negative is the uracil. What's uracil? It's the ability to evolve, to take in a different piece of information, altering your overall genetics, to then it becomes not just messenger RNA, then it becomes your DNA over time. Whether you assimilate to that messenger RNA to then become part of your DNA, or you bear a baby that then holds that uracil activation through that alteration. And it's not just from the V's. People are like, oh, mRNA, it's just from... No, it's also from your friends and family who may not even had a V at all, but they have their own immune system that is a little bit different than yours. And you have the uracil in one of your DNA acids that will take in that information and take on that programming and assimilate with that change. Okay? And so the system always needed to make sure they had a loophole to start all over again. Because if they stop reproducing children with no backup, like all artificial wombs, then people who already don't want to feel evolution, the whole human would be extinct. But the fact that you're able to procreate so excessively, even destroying the mother at some point, but even destroying the genetic line at some point, because too much procreation is causing death, right? Remember, conception. Too much conception is death, not enough conception is death. What the hell does that mean? Because again, when you develop so many people, so you have a patch of grass, and so many people are eating more grass than the grass is able to regenerate, or you have to build so many factories and infrastructure to make sure that grass is growing, that infrastructure requires resources to keep that grass growing, and then all the infrastructure to require life then actually destroys life. People like, the earth is not overpopulated. No, it's not overpopulated. But we have destruction. And when you're developing so many people with so many needs, especially when they're so destructive, and you have to have agencies and medicine and infrastructure to support everyone's needs and wants and consumerist addictions, that's a lot to manage. Can you imagine managing a prison population? I'm watching that again. I'm watching Orange is the New Black. And you have to manage all the different cultures, all the different lifestyles, all the different backgrounds, all the different idiosyncrasies, all the violence, all the strategy of them trying to get over. And then it's insane. Then you get riots. You get people who've taken their position a little bit too seriously. Okay, I mean, that's the thing. So you got to have a smaller population to make it manageable and a pleasant place to live. Because imagine, do you really want to live behind gates your whole fucking life? Do you really want to be in 15-minute cities your whole fucking life because they have to surveil you because of your proclivities to violence? I mean, when you have people who are keeping people hostage in a basement, harming children and girls, and even animals, and you don't even know about them until they happen to break free, just like what happened over here in Cleveland a few years ago when those girls were held hostage. I hope we have a surveillance society to such an extent so we can weed out the predators that walk among you, that could be someone that you go to school with, someone that you go to church with. That guy, he was hiding in plain sight. These are people that you bring into your house and they watch your kids. You don't even know what the hell's going on in their background. They're nice on Facebook, right? They're all pleasant and they give you money and they give you support. But they could be hiding a fucking slew of people in their fucking basement. You would never know this. You would never know this. So you know the system has been breeding some pretty bad situations, and they can't stop you from having children, but eventually it's going to be, where people are going to be sterilized just through the environment. And they're going to have the system develop the people they need to run society. And also artificial intelligence, the robots. So that way we're not enslaving humans. Or animals. Can you see that? Remember those animals you see, whether it's in New York City, giving tourists a ride on a freaking horse cart? That horse is forced to perform every single day. These animals that are in zoos are in jail. Some of them, yes, were rescued from the wild, and so they can't be out there. That's fine. But you see out there, like even in third world countries, where these animals are beasts of burden. That's slavery. That's slavery. And so I think the reason why immortality was never introduced is because we haven't found the answer to the perfect human. The system always needed to make sure they had a loophole to start over again. Now the system has both. They have a loophole to start over again, and those who can't survive won't, and those who are strong enough and strategic enough and evolutionary enough could potentially tap into indefinite life. But the system needed a way to get rid of the undesirable humans without targeting anyone specifically, and we can't repeat World War II. You have to volunteer to leave this earth and be okay with it. And you would have to teach your family how to be okay with leaving this earth after all your resources have been used up. And if you were deadly and destructive, the justice system would hold you accountable, and convicted criminals could perish in the jails. But we also need justice. We need justice reform and prison reform. Because I'm watching, Orange is the New Black. It's a pretty intense series. Okay, I sometimes have to fast forward through some of it because it's like glorified, gratuitous violence that I'm just like, dude, I just can't. And so those segments, some of them are like not really offering too much to the story except to just shock you into violence. And so I'll just fast forward through it. And so we also need justice reform and prison reform. But now we can live without both mortality. Now we can live with both mortality and indefinite life, and you have a choice. Okay. Okay. All right. So, all right, I'm going to read this. I'm just going to put it out there because you got to have it in your head. And in my head, too. So you got to hear it. Relative to where you do research, the dates might differ, but the ballparks are around the same. It's about the cradles of civilization. I've seen so much conflicting dates, but anything over 5,000, 6,000 years ago, it's all about the same. In my opinion, what really matters is the last 6,000 years, but you can always dispute the oldest civilizations to the most influential. But I wanted to go in chronological order based upon, what I would think. I would start with Sumer, then go to Egypt. Of course, the Bible is a great reference, or the Old Testament and the New Testament, and then, of course, all the different contributing nations. And so Rosicrucianism is melding all the cradles of civilization together, and all the religion that came from it, and developed offshoots it would meld in so many different things. Like I said, Rosicrucianists, Jewish mystics, Christian Gnostics, the Hermetics, Egypt, and then Greco-Roman stuff, right? And so civilization is said to have originated independently at 6 different points on the globe, known as the 6 cradles of civilization. So independently originate. So the giants, the Yahweh, and then the Nephilim, and then you see how that works. And that humans were slaves, okay, the Anunnaki. I mean, we can talk about that they were like space people, and that was Zecharia Sitchin's theory, was that the Anunnaki were the aliens that came down in the space stuff and taught humans. But where do they come from? I don't know. That's just like, I would not dispute that too much. And they're saying that Nibiru was like the original planet. It's gonna I don't know how much true that is, but hey, everyone has their beliefs, and I'm not gonna dispute. How are you gonna know, really, right? And so, anyways, so Rosicrucianism, right? So, 6 cradles of civilization: Mesopotamia, Indus Valley, China, Egypt, Peru, Mexico. And so Mesopotamia, 4,000, 2,000 BC to 6,000 or 8,000 years ago. Indus Valley, 9,000 years ago, 7,000 BC. Egypt, over 5,000 years ago, or 3150 BCE. So it's good to understand BCE, BC, AD, and see where it's like integers. You got the negative, which is the BC, and then you have the positive, which is the AD. And so it's no different than plus or minus, and then a whole number line, counting forward, counting back. And so it's no different than, of course, the integers, plus and minus, or negative and positive, whatever. Okay, 6 cradles. Okay, so then, Egypt, 5,000 years ago, or 3150 BC. China, 1250 BC, or 3,272 years ago. They had the longest written history. That's what they said. And then Peru is 1200 to 1530 AD, or 822 years ago. All right, Aztec, 722 years ago. So Peru and the Aztec empires are the newest of cradles of civilization. Okay, and the oldest, like Mesopotamia and Egypt and Indus and China. But so that's why the Middle East is so important to understand. And so giants ruled these empires for many years. Humans then became smart because they employed someone like Imhotep when he was a child. He died before he was 20 years old, but he contributed so much to humanity. But now it's time to evolve from the Egyptian alchemical surgical ways. And so John asked what happened to Imhotep. There is no record of where he died, where he was buried, but allegedly he was the chancellor to Dozier, I think the second pharaoh or the first pharaoh, second of the dynastic pharaohs way back then. Okay? And then we get to Yahweh. Oh gosh. And this is where I'm just trying to figure out, okay, so Nephilim, and that's why I posted those reels about witches, okay? And the witches turning into, beautiful women that you see all over Facebook, and then they become gnarled up. Some age gracefully, and others do so much plastic surgery that when their body does finally give out, you see they become so bloated because their immune system is activating and is causing them to swell. That's why their faces turn so like chipmunky and a little bit alien-like. Okay, so what I figured, I'm not going to read all of this because it's a lot, but Adam was probably a giant, and then Noah was probably a giant. Moses became human. Moses was human. And then Yahweh, who is Yahweh? Okay, when they said, what is Yahweh? Well, they said a war god, conception of God, and the conception of God. Yeah, masculine and feminine, and then all of that. And then also, he was the one that blew the dust to develop Adam. I don't know how you blow dust to develop a human. But I couldn't tell you the actual blueprint of I believe evolution, absolutely. I believe that, yes, monkeys then had been able to, over time, be given characteristics and evolve. Because they can learn. And then, because even I feel like I look like a monkey. Okay. And so some of us even look like animals out there, whether it's our pets or certain animals out there. Okay. Because we all come from the same pool of bacteria that becomes intelligent and has its own blueprint. And so then the giants, so the Jews actually defeated the giants first. So that's why they were reticent to go into the land of Canaan, because it's run by a bunch of giants. And so, and those giants, they went to, so they think they were wandering, a wandering Jew. They're wandering. What does that mean, a wandering Jew? What does it mean to be a wandering Jew? A legendary person said to have been condemned by Jesus Christ to wander the earth until the second coming. Oh. Huh. Oh, okay. I guess that wasn't what I expected. All right. Wandering. That's something you learn new things every day. Wandering Jews in the desert for 40 years? Was it that? Okay. According to the Passover story, after escaping slavery in Egypt, the Jewish people wandered for 40 years in the desert on the way to the Promised Land. Today, the Negev Desert is making it more than half the Israel's territory. Okay, so there you go. The Negev Desert is an area that they escaped. They had to sit there before they went and battled the giants. Because why did they go there? Because it was King Solomon's. Yeah. They went there because that was the first temple. They had to go take it back. So they became slaves and they had to go take it back. And there were giants there, that's right, the Philistines, Goliath. Okay. These stories, I swear. That's why I was kind of dreading the whole religious aspect of it. But I knew I had to study it, but I didn't know which aspect. But I had to study the Old Testament. If you're going to study the Bible, study the Old Testament first and understand why. Okay. And so the Jews actually defeated the giants first. So yes, giants played an important role in the biblical story, particularly the relation to their occupation of the Promised Land. As will be seen, Israel initially refused to enter the land because of giants and only need and only men of great faith, Joshua, Caleb, and David, were able to defeat them. So in the context of Genesis, God sent the flood to wipe out violent humans, including the Nephilim, seen in the language of all flesh. Okay, God continued the human race through Noah and new Adam, who was not tainted by the Nephilim blood. Okay, so Noah was the new Adam. Interesting. It was not tainted by the Nephilim blood. Noah's direct lineage is given all the way back to Adam, and he is said to be the blameless in his generation, possibly referring to his pure line. Notice the plural generations. In spite of the flood, giants eventually made a comeback and dwelt in the land of Canaan. Okay, so yeah, there were some pretty brutal giants, and that's where all the Grimm's fairy tales come from, which telling you through the stories from even the Middle Ages that even were before that. Because the Grimm's guys, the Grimm brothers, they scouted the globe and was listening to the stories of indigenous people, the oral traditions, the oral stories. Okay, and then they wrote them in books, and they were talking about giants. Well, can you imagine the Nephilim? And so you see the Grimm's fairy tales, the Bible, and Greek mythology was all about understanding the Nephilim and how they played a part in all these wars. And then, of course, their children, right? Joshua later devoted the Anakim to destruction, only leaving them in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. And that's when I'm like, oh, that's when I connected together. That was the whole reason why the whole Philistines and then the Hamas, who's probably taken on some of the giant beliefs of wanting to eradicate the Jews, because the Jews destroyed Goliath. That was their God, worshiping that person. And so there's probably generations of retribution. Okay? And so you can't live with someone who doesn't like your ancestors and doesn't like you. You can't live next to them without having to arm yourself to the teeth. Okay? So David kills Goliath. As you've seen, Joshua left some Anakim remaining in the Philistine cities of Gath, Gaza, and Ashdod. This is significant for several reasons. First, this means the task that God gave Israel to drive out the Canaanites was not complete. Second, the Philistines with whom the Anakim remained became Israel's chief enemy during the time of Samuel. And third, the Philistines' champion was from Gath. Okay. So the Nephilim are mysterious beings or people in the Hebrew Bible who are described as being large and strong. The Hebrew word Nephilim is sometimes translated as giants and sometimes taken to mean the fallen ones. Their origins are disputed. Some view them as offspring of fallen angels and humans. Well, I don't know what that means, fallen angels, but okay. I think they're like deadly. When they have a disorder, see, I was looking up giganticism, and they're saying that, okay, so there's giants that are living today and they're peaceful. So why are they peaceful? Because they've been civilized to live in this world and not destroy somebody and not be violent. But maybe there are tribes out there way back when that developed, that had the Nephilim that were violent. And that's probably all those ogres and horror movies that you see of all, like the skinwalkers and all that, right? And so there's probably some deadly characteristics and violent behaviors that you even see like in some people. Like when I get trolls that come through and I see them and they're like laughing at my stuff and I look at their Facebook page, they're big men. They're like living in like Australia or other places, and they're driving dirt bikes and they're brutish and they're like, I'm all male, heavily testosterone. And I'm thinking to them, my God, if they were 20 feet tall, they'd be one of those brutish giants that would have destroyed women, raped and pillaged, potentially, if given the opportunity, destroyed anyone that looked different. There are men in our society that act like some of these giants that were destroyed way back when. But what's keeping them alive? Their society. But if given the opportunity, they would do whatever their hormones would tell them to do. That's the difference between a barbarian and someone who is civilized, is that you control your proclivities. And if you can't, then that's where you have to use drugs or the justice system. And so in the Hebrew Bible, Rephaites or Rephaim describes an ancient race of giants in Canaan from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. Many locations were also named after them. According to Genesis, King Kedorlaomer and his allies attacked and defeated the Rephaites at Ashtaroth Karnaim. Anakim are mentioned in the Bible. Now, Anakim also in Star Wars, right? Anakim are mentioned in the Bible as descendants of Anak. According to the Old Testament, the Anakim lived in the southern part of the land of Canaan near Hebron. Genesis 14.56 states that they inhabited the region later known as Edom and Moab in the days of Abraham. And Abraham was the beginning of the Jewish people. It seems Chedorlaomer fought three groups of giants. The Rephaim, the Septuagint usually actually translates the Rephaim in Genesis as giants. The Zuzim, which probably the Zanzumim of the Deuteronomy, and the Emim, the Amorites, may also have been giants. I've heard of Amorites and Akkadians, Amorites, Akkadians, Assyrians, Babylon. I mean, all these words, as I've been studying so much, recognizable. Zuzim, according to the Hebrew Bible, the Zuzim or Zuzites were a tribe who lived in Ham or land east of the Jordan River between Bashan and Moab. The etymology of the name is unknown, but may derive from the Hebrew ziz, which roughly translates to moving things, okay, which move. And then, all right, yeah. Emim is basically Rephaim, giants, Anakim, all that. All right, so there's that. Giants. And then I was like, oh, giganticism. Disorders don't have to be disorders unless you keep treating them. That's the thing. That's why people are getting such aggressive diseases, because they keep treating their disorders. They develop another offspring of a disorder. And then when when the body wants to release that offspring, then you're like, oh, I don't want to feel the body releasing. So you take another herb, another extract, another painkiller, another detox, and you develop another disorder. And so disorders don't have to be disorders unless you keep treating them. And then the treatments deteriorate the person. That's the aging process, because you've been treated to death. That's the aging process. What if the giants released their own demons and ate all food and became peaceful and productive giants? I would imagine it would be very expensive to feed a giant lab-created meat. Or eating humans. Now, I'll read the abstract, but that's it. The biblical giant Goliath has an identifiable family tree suggestive of autosomal dominant inheritance. We suggest that he had a hereditary pituitary disorder, possibly due to the AIP gene causing early onset of familial acromegaly or giganticism. We comment on the evidence within the scriptures for his other relatives, including a relative with 6 digits, and speculate on possible causes of the 6 digits. Recognition of a hereditary pituitary disorder in the biblical Goliath and his family sheds additional information on his and other family members' battles with David and his relatives. And they're showing someone on Facebook that has 6 digits. So the system is bringing kind of back some of this interesting lineage. And so I did a Facebook reel on witches and women who turn into witches because they're deteriorating. And they either love you or hate you to death. One of the two. I'm not going to read that. I read that yesterday. Oh, yeah. Here we go. The legitimacy of the Zionist state. And this is written by a Palestinian, I think. Yeah, I think he's Palestinian. So, inaccuracy. Hamas must be part of any Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. Israel's refusal to deal with Hamas doesn't make sense. After all, Israel eventually negotiated with the Palestinian Liberation Organization after decades of enduring its terrorist attacks against Israelis and Jews. Response. Hamas is committed to the elimination of Israel's existence by whatever means necessary. Okay? This commitment is articulated in the Hamas Charter and is regularly reiterated by its leadership. The Hamas Charter is rife with incendiary anti-Semitism. Israel cannot be expected to negotiate with an entity that espouses hatred of Jews, seek its destruction, and uses terrorism and rocket attacks to further that goal. Israel and the international community have been clear. Hamas must recognize Israel's right to exist, renounce the use of violence and terrorism, and accept previously negotiated Israeli-Palestinian agreements. Until it meets these requirements, neither Israel nor the international community will engage with Hamas. Israel does have relations with Palestinian Authority and its leaders who are former PLO officials. However, this only came about once the PLO met similar requirements by recognizing Israel's right to exist, renouncing terrorism, and pledging to remove clauses in the Palestinian National Charter that called for the destruction of the State of Israel. The PLO, Palestinian Authority, and Israel's other Arab peace partners include Egypt and Jordan have done what Hamas adamantly refuses to do, accept the reality of Israel's existence and reject efforts to eradicate Israel. Okay? Accept is ACCEPT. To accept the reality of Israel's existence and reject the efforts to eradicate Israel. Hamas is well aware of the steps it must take if it's interested in negotiating with Israel. And that was written by Navid Anjum. Okay, so people want to be doing death threats against me because I talk about immortality and immune system activation. That's not allowed. That's why I went to the FBI. Okay? And so imagine that's what Israel has to deal with. People who hate them so much, they want you to die for being different. Can you believe that? For saying immortality and immune system activation? Wow. And so I think I read this. Okay. I think I read this already. I read that. And then Audrey said, as long as there are slaughterhouses, there will be battlefields. And that's why we're going to lab-created meat. Okay? Because people are hateful. They're very hateful. And so we have to go back to history in order to forge into the future. Sometimes you have to repeat history because people forget how destructive their parents were thousands of years ago. The system flooded out all the destructive giants who cannibalized and brutalized humans, enslaved them. So that whole history was erased, but now you get to see how horrible humans are to each other because of what was taught by their parents, the destructive giants, and then the children, because their parents are children of the giants, and their parents' parents, and their parents' parents, all the way back then. You can read that in the Old Testament. Judaism is about remembering how destructive people are and to bring balance and evolution and knowledge to the world to those who can handle it. And if you are making a choice to be ignorant, you won't evolve. Okay? So you can imagine that Israel is so evolutionary that they have such advanced systems of protection like the Iron Dome and other advanced systems. And then what? Hamas only has a few rockets? A lot of rockets, yes. But why is it that Hamas only has a few rockets and Israel has... Because not only have they developed their own technology, but they're being supported by those who understand what's going on, because we are, like in America, we're fighting our own countrymen who want to destroy each other. Okay? And so if you make a choice to be ignorant, you won't evolve. And if you won't protect yourself, you will leave yourself open for someone to manipulate you. Maybe it's time to be smart. Maybe it's time to evolve. But right now, so many humans out there are acting like their ancestors, a giant who brutalized other humans. If people were not armed to the teeth, they would have been genocided a long time ago. If you have to protect yourself from other people to the point where everybody has to be armed with checkpoints, now you know why we're in wars. Noah was told to build an ark and warn people because the system had to destroy the destructive giants. Some giants still escaped, but they had to be hunted down and destroyed, or else they would have destroyed humanity and enslaved them. That's what's going on right now. Very biblical, if you can even wrap your mind around it. But I get it. I'll tell you, I suffered the last 7 years, okay, and the last 49 years. Suffering is a trait of the Jewish mystics. Suffering makes you remember never ever to go there again, and that is your superpower, people. Remember my contribution to the world through the Jewish mystics? You have a chance to save yourself. No one is trying to destroy you except for you. You have a chance, but you must change and evolve and see if you can handle to sit in the power of suffering and eat all the food. Okay? And so there's that, and I did the Solomon's Temple, and everything is physics and chemistry and biology. In a slower frequency environment, you could get away with eating 3 light meals a day and look hot for everyone, right? In a high frequency environment, the RPMs, right, the rotations per minute, the revolutions per minute is in the body are moving so fast that your 3 light meals a day and fear of food is starving you. That is why the died suddenly and the lack of complete development of children, because humans are not eating for their environment. They're eating with fear of symptoms and, of course, eating for traditions. Skinny girls and boys need to understand that, as the RPMs in their environment are ravaging their body, their mind, and their spirit, which is why you are getting the turbo cancers, all the offspring from all the herbs and remedies, and growing very, very quickly, and people are not getting ahead of the growth with proper release. Too much conception equals died suddenly. In essence, the children, rogue offspring, are eating your memories, no different than human children of parents eating their parents' memories, using all the herbs and oncology, surgeries, and food mitigation. Deterioration is lack of memories. Death is a memory that wiped you out in your body, mind, and spirit. Death comes from starvation. And so then I said, why does positive times a positive equals a positive? Too much growth, you will die. Why does a negative times a positive equals a positive? Too much death, you will die. Why does negative or positive times a negative equals a negative? Because negative is the opening to evolution. That's the uracil. And change, or you will die. Obesity is too much growth, leading to starvation, because the parent cells are starving and the food is feeding the antibodies or the offspring stuck in the person's immune system, and those offspring are destroying the parental infrastructure, equals death. Emaciation is too much death from starvation, equals death. Balance is life. Emaciation means you're starving, okay? Balance is life. And the negative attached to balanced positives are the openings to life and evolution. Did your children and grandchildren come into this world on a strong, stable platform? You will find out soon enough. Maybe it is time to start changing the way you do things, grandma, mom. You know very well your children are starving. All children are starving. Why? Because they are not allowed to be sick. And those remedies, developing offspring, are cannibalizing them. You just hope they have a good life, but no guarantee you'll be a long life if they are not allowed to be sick and not allowed to eat gluten and sugar and meat and milk. All these crunchy mothers are not only starving themselves, but also their children. Now look at your kids, please. Remember, fear of food and symptoms and being skinny was built into your culture. And so how will you change and survive your own culture? All children need milk, meat, bread, grains, fruit, and veggies. All children need food. Ice cream was so necessary. I ate so much ice cream last summer to save myself from being ravaged by the environment. I had to catch up. Your children are in deficit. Of course they are. They're growing up in an accelerated environment, speeding up their immune system RPMs. Okay? Why do you think these kids are getting surgery now? Why are these kids? And so that's why I said, that's why I posted that best formula sounds of a V6 engine, a V8 engine, a V10, and V12, because those are high performance cars. Those are race cars. And when you are in an environment that's like racing, your heart's racing, your blood's racing, everything is racing. That's using up a lot of resources, and then you have to feed and you have to release. But what do people do? They take herbs and extracts and blood pressure medicine to then resist the environment. And guess what happens? When you resist, there's going to be an eventual breaking point. When you have so much resistance, and I've been around my husband's what is it? It's his crossbow. Okay, and I was so afraid of that because I knew that crossbow has these strings. They're not strings, they're like almost like ropes that are taut so tight around specific areas of where you pull the bow back, and there's so much resistance that I can picture those ropes breaking. And when there's that much breakage, not only do you deal with shrapnel, but that's broken. Now that crossbow would be broken, right? Because that rope, that thing, those tendons broke because of so much resistance. And if those ropes are weak and they're fraying and they're old, like people who don't reinforce their immune system, so much of those RPMs, and then taking something to stop the RPMs or force the RPMs to slow down instead of feeding them and just resting and waiting for it to pass. People are causing resistance in their body, and they die suddenly because the rope breaks, the vessels break, and then you have an aneurysm, you have blood clots, you have heart attacks and strokes, and that's what's going on. So when you compare the atmosphere revving your cells at extremely high RPMs, imagine not only how much gas is used to fuel the energy, but what kind of wear and tear happens to the infrastructure. Imagine you are not feeding your body the type of food like meat and cream and eggs and fruits and veggies and grains and breads to fuel your body's high RPMs. you stall or your body breaks down and glitches or crashes. Right now, this environment is a race car, and it's revving your engines at that extremely high level. Not only are people starving, but they are also breaking down because the environment is that accelerated and the RPMs are going so many rotations per minute. Are you keeping up, or are you activating those babies in your body called antibody offspring to cannibalize you? That's literally what's going on. The aging process has been accelerated, so has the turbo cancers, because you absolutely have no idea what kind of environment you're in because you refuse to believe we're in climate change. You fell into somebody else's argument, or you're under the influence, or you can't feel a damn thing. And the environment will only get more aggressive, and the RPMs will even go faster. Many of you will not catch up because you don't have the infrastructure to catch up. You'll have a resistance that will break the tendons, break the blood vessels, and then died suddenly. And so then I want to say, yeah, Noah never ate humans. He was not a Nephilim. I learned that now, okay? He was a giant, yes. Maybe he had enough food, and I don't know where he got it from, but he was not the bloodthirsty Nephilim that they talk about in the Book of Giants. Okay? So I'll just let you read that. All right, so I got that. And you can read the Nephilim, Oh, and I wrote this, and John and I were bantering back and forth, and I was trying to figure out, well, what did Noah eat, Well, he's like, well, he was in the Noah's Ark, and he had a lot of animals, but yeah, but that was like 40 days, but what was the rest of the 900 something years? What did he eat then? So when humans stopped being slaves to the giants, we enslaved each other and animals. And so I thank John for that banter. Eventually, animals and humans will be free from slavery, but it'll be painful to earn your place in this world. Freedom means responsibility. And then John says, I'm sure one day we will outlive this sad tradition. I said, yeah, it'll be a fight because people feel the need to lord their power over others. People don't give up that power easily. Oh, I know that. And then I added that, but I didn't add it to that because I tagged him in that, so I don't want to put that. But I said this, the next thing, that also means we will not be enslaving children to be our mini-me's. The system will guide reproduction carefully because child slavery is all over the world. Some people's slave quarters are much better than others, but slavery is still slavery. We are in a transition, so don't feel bad that we are in that transition. Some of you have kids, and you got to raise them. But eventually, you don't want to have your girls be married off to someone who's going to then procreate another kid that's going to be suffering and may not even survive. And then she doesn't even survive, and that whole family is gone. You want to get your girls to be strong, to be a warrior, and strong, and evolutionary, and let her deal with her demons. But you know how things go. People are so traditional. They won't let their kids rest for a minute. They have to keep up with everyone around them. But anyways, but slavery is still slavery. So even when you're forcing your kids to keep up with everybody else, that's still slavery. But your kids are like, well, I want to be like everybody else. Well, that's the thing. That's what being a parent means, is that you don't have to be like everybody else. And you as a parent need to learn how to put your boundaries down. My mother did. She said, I'm not like other parents. I'm not going to be a Brownie Scout leader or Girl Scout leader. You're not going into Brownies. You're not going into Girl Scouts. You can go into soccer, which I did, and gymnastics and other stuff. But she was not going to be like other parents. And she wasn't. And, I'm like, why can't you be like everybody else? Because now I understand why. I'm looking at everyone around me and they're fucking dropping like flies. There's a reason why she wasn't like everybody else. She gave me a fucking chance to survive because she made me a fucking warrior. So some people's slave quarters are much better than others, but slavery is still slavery. We are in a transition, so don't feel bad that we're in that transition. That's why the system is doing what it's doing. There's a fine line between raising children and developing slaves. Some people actually raise their children. Other people enslave their children. Some people's pets are part of their families. Some people's pets are just centerpieces, entertainment, and then disposable when not useful. And that is very hard to regulate, and you can't legislate morals. But you see the type of adults out there, how they treat themselves, their animals, and their children. And so the system is watching everybody, and we are seeing how we are raised in the 80s and what we've turned into as adults. And then what did I say? Oh yeah, there, all right, okay. All right, I'm almost done. So why people don't know this side of history as far as the giants? I gotta drink. This is coffee, by the way. Why people don't know this side of history about the giants? Most people are not mature enough to handle another side of history. Most people will deny sides of history they never were exposed to. Some people will whitewash history. And like the fairy tales, just like the fairy tales, they weren't all joy, and happy. Some were downright atrociously grim to children, like Hansel and Gretel and the witch eating those kids, right? Why didn't you know about the Tartarian giants who potentially brutalized humans? Could you even wrap your mind around the brutality of what happened to the humans way back when? I can barely even watch what they did to people in the Middle Ages, much less what happened 6,000 years ago, which is why I'm not a fan of the surgical system or the veterinary system. Brutality under the influence of anesthesia or sober is still brutality, which is why my world is more humane for humans and even animals, and potentially even animals who have never gone under the knife or had too many antibiotics shoved down their throat. And that's why you don't breed so many animals and people with so many issues, because becoming whole again is fucking painful. That's why the Georgia Guidestones is guiding reproduction carefully, because so many humans and animals bred within an inch of their life and suffering from those who are suffering. And I mean astronomically suffering to the point where you have no choice but to put everyone down or die suddenly. And that's what's going on. That's why the system is turning the heat up, because the suffering is astronomical. Because how many agencies do you think the world can afford breeding people who are brutal to each other? And look at the shelters. The animal shelters are full of animals suffering because people are overbreeding them and selling them on the open market. And once the vet system gets a hold of them, it's just a matter of time before you have to put that animal down. I learned the hard way, and that was painful, and we all get to watch it. Oh yeah, I got a lot of flack for it. Oh, I know. I believe me, there are websites and videos about me and my dog Sugar, and I was not hiding anything. I was telling you exactly what I was doing, and I'm not ashamed of it, because I was trying to save her. And then I realized that once you do brutalize an animal through all the different surgeries and spays and neuters, because you're too afraid of them reproducing, because you won't keep watch over them, and you have to have 1 billion animals in your house, I realized that I couldn't win against a system that already brutalized my animal. And that's the thing, why the J world is so lucrative for those who have not been damaged too much by the system, by the surgical system, by the holistic system, by the energy healing system. When you have not been damaged too much physically by accidents and war and medical treatments, you might have a chance to have a lesser hell of getting your life back than someone else who's been brutally damaged by the medical surgical system. And so that's how I figured out that those who have not been damaged too much by the surgical system or the medical system might have a chance to reclaim their life back from their ancestors, who are so dying to take them back into the upside down, into Hades, into wherever, into the universe. And so, yeah, my dog was a gift to all of you watching that whole situation. And I had to be there. I had to sit in that pain. Audrey saw exactly what I had to deal with, because I was on the show to her before she died. Audrey got to see. Audrey knows exactly what I had to deal with. And she was there for me during that time where I'm just like, fuck. So I let her be there for me. And so I thank you, Audrey, for that. And I had to sit in that situation. I had to sit in that situation for at least 3 months, since November. So from November all the way to February, when my dog died, February 10th or 11th, whatever. I sat with that suffering. How many of you have already put her down and said, be done with it? No, I sat with it trying to figure out how. And then that's when I saw the openings from those drills from the veterinary system. The surgical holes, 2 of them. One drill was for a tumor that was perfectly shaped and it was getting bigger and bigger. And the other hole was from the spay. So when you're cutting into your animal through the veterinary system, they're fucking suffering. That's brutality. That's some Nephilim shit. The medical holistic surgical system is Nephilim shit. That came out of Imhotep days. The Egyptian days. And I was giving her all the food that was good for animals and humans, because she needed the milk, the meat, the cheese. She needed, and that's still, I mean, she didn't die. I had to give her, because the suffering was so much for myself, not so much for her. But people can dispute that. But what was the issue is my husband was having a very hard time with it. All of you were having a hard time with it. I even was like, I just don't have the energy anymore to keep bringing her up and down. And it's just like, oh my God. I would have to have around the clock staff to go through that process. And maybe she would have to be asleep to go through that process of regenerating. And we don't have the infrastructure for it. So I actually had to get her destroyed by the veterinary system. I had to give her back to the veterinary system. You're more than welcome. I would not do that with it or on anyone. Rip Sugar and all of you had an opinion on what you thought you knew. Can shut the fuck up. Thank you. Thanks, Audrey. But yeah, that was a pretty brutal time. But you had to see it. You had to see it. And that's what you do to your animals when you give them to the veterinary system. They get brutalized under the surgery. And you don't even know if they even wake up during it. You have no idea. You're not there. And so you have no idea what kind of torture these poor animals go through in the veterinary system. You have no idea. It must be nice to drop them off and then come back. And they don't have, animals can't even say anything. They've been drugged. And they can't even speak English to tell you what kind of fucking horror they've gone through with the vet system. The butchery system. So, sometimes you have to fucking see it. And I sat with it. Because I was strong enough to fucking sit with it. 200,000 years ago, old ancient Anunnaki city was discovered in Africa. I believe it. A 200,000-year-old ancient Anunnaki city was discovered in Africa. I believe it. Which is probably why then the Africans were enslaved for so many years, because maybe they enslaved the humans to their ancestors. And so the roles had to reverse to then bring them down to size. See, that's the thing. You don't know. You're only seeing one slice of history. One tiny fucking slice of history of mankind. Okay? And so, anyway, so that's I got, all right, so I'm down to, all right. So there you go. So that's what I'm saying. You have now a chance to redirect. No one's coming into your house. No one's dropping, things, bombs, whatever in your neighborhood. You have a chance. You have access to food, water, air, and whatever. And if you're out there protesting what's going on in the Middle East, then you need to go pick up yourself, fly your ass over to the Middle East, renounce your citizenship to America, renounce your citizenship to Europe, renounce your citizenship to Australia, and go join the Hamas. Like, I'm serious. And there are people in my town who are also Jewish who are taken up for Hamas. That's how messed up all of these assumptions are. That's how messed up. When you're so privileged to sit behind your computer in your nice warm fucking house, and you're given almost every access to all the different foods and clothing and entertainment, and you have the nerve to shit on the pan that fucking feeds you. That's why we're in a great reset. Bye.